Welcome to the Entre Pastors podcast on YouTube. This is a show that helps pastors think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs. Well, hello there, and welcome to the Entre Pastors podcast on YouTube. My name is John Sanders. I'm one of the co-founders of Entre Pastors, and really excited to share this week's guest with you on our podcast. The title of this show is Rethinking Church and Breaking the Mold. And the name of our guest this week is Todd Meert. He's been a friend of mine for a number of years, and you're going to hear Todd's story of moving from a place that many pastors can relate to, being stuck in a relatively small church that is essentially stuck in the past, not very willing to change, structured in such a way that the pastor does not really have the ability to lead and innovate without just tremendous amounts of conflict, and also being paid kind of a normal church wage, which is kind of subpar, below average. And today, Todd is in a much healthier place. He has followed God's leading in his heart to break out in boldness, to step out into a new way of doing church. And certainly that is incorporating some entrepreneurial ideas, as Todd has been blessed with an incredible space, a commercial space that he and his group are using as outreach for the community, providing different entrepreneurial endeavors. And you're going to hear him share all about that. So I love Todd's story, and I hope many more pastors get to experience something similar as they sense the permission to break away from the model of church that we've always known and have been given, and recognize that there's a lot more freedom that we have available to us. So I think you're going to be inspired by Todd's story. Without any further ado, let's cut to this interview that I did recently with my friend Todd Meert. Here we go. Well, Todd, it is my pleasure to have you on as a guest on the Entre Pastors podcast, man. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, John. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so let me do this, Todd. I'm going to tell your story just real briefly and set it up, and then you can argue with any of the finer points that you hear. But Todd is someone. What's that, Todd?
I'm going to fact check you.
Yeah, you fact check me all you want, or let Mark Zuckerberg do it, whatever. But here's Todd. Todd is someone that I've been connected with now for a number of years. We've developed a friendship. I think you might have connected with me originally through my first podcast, potentially. I think that's maybe where we got connected. Yes. But I have watched Todd go on a journey from what I would call normal pastoring in North America, in the small church world, which is most of us in pastor world. And so by normal, I mean working in some less than ideal circumstances, and we can unpack some of those if we want, Todd. But I've watched you go from kind of being in that place to being in such a healthier place today, not only in how you're doing church, which we can get into some of that, but also financially what that means for your family and even for the church, the funding of the church, with some things that you are doing today. So I'll probably say this at the end of the show, but I'm going to start at the beginning as well. Todd, I'm super proud of you, man, for the work that I've seen you do and the journey that I've seen you on. So what would you argue with? Where would you disagree and push back in that setup there?
Wow. I don't know that I can. I know there's a lot of people out there hoping I can find a flaw in what you just said to prove your mortality, but that was pretty spot on.
Not today. Well, let's unpack this, Todd. Take me back to kind of the beginning of how you got into pastoral ministry. How long have you been doing this gig? And then we'll start the journey from there.
Yeah, I'm one of those guys that got into pastoral ministry as kind of an occupation, a full-time occupation later in life. I used to be a school teacher, a high school basketball coach, and I ended up, when my kids went off to college and we became empty nesters, I felt God's pull to go into full-time ministry. And so in my mid-40s, I went back to Bible college and got my ministry degree. And so I started, late 40s-ish, about 8 or 9 years ago in the ministry. And with my very first, I was a very old youth pastor, because youth pastor jobs are usually where you start, right? And so I started later on in life. and started very much in the traditional church setting. I had grew up in the traditional church setting. I had experienced really nothing other than the traditional church setting. And so when I went into ministry, that's where I slid in with all the preconceived notions that I had from 40 plus years of life about what the North American church was supposed to look like, act like, sound like, all of those kinds of things. And so I had a lot of life experience, maybe that a lot of new pastors don't have, but I had a very narrow view of what the church was and what it was supposed to look like and sound like.
Todd, what
Early
did you
on.
do before going into pastoral ministry? What was your gig?
So I was a teacher and a coach.
Okay.
And
High
so
school teacher?
what's that?
High school teacher?
Yeah, high school and college. I wrote college curriculum for 3 different community colleges, and then also taught high school age kids in kind of EFE type classes or technology classes. Because I specialized when I first got married, I was a master electrician, and I
Okay.
took that electrical skill and turned it into teaching.
Very cool. So it's interesting though. I hear you saying I had a career, kind of a normal job career, and then I transitioned into pastoral ministry, and so I just signed up for the path that we see is a very kind of normal traditional path into it, even starting with the youth pastor. You didn't even skip that step, but that many years, late into the game, you're like, I'll be a youth pastor and then I'll be a real pastor. I'm saying that totally joking for all my youth pastors out there, but that's kind of how we view it, like then I'm going to step up and lead at the next level and whatever. That's a different podcast for a different show probably. But, and it's interesting how you willfully just kind of stepped into some really unhealthy things in the church world and didn't really question it because it's like, this is what we call church. This is what we call pastoring. And so describe kind of what that looked like for you once you got into that place. Like, what were some of the things you're dealing with? I mean, you can take it in any direction you want, but paint that picture for us. Where was Todd just a few years ago doing normal pastoral ministry?
For me, it was probably very similar. There's going to be a little bit of differences. I don't want to paint the picture that the bride of Christ looks exactly like this in every single church setting. But for me, it's probably a story that other people have experienced. And that was stepping into a traditional church that has been established for, maybe 50 years, maybe 150 years. The 2 first churches that I pastored at, the first one was 150 years old. The second one was 50. And both of them were very, very similar in the sense that you had a history that this is just how things are done. Mm-hmm. And this is what can be expected. And this is your role. And if you don't like it, well, then we'll find somebody else, plug them in, and let them be the puppet. Mm-hmm. And it was something that I just really struggled with. I struggled with the idea as I started seeing these things, and as I got to be, I was involved in 2 very healthy or very unhealthy, very, very unhealthy elder boards. Both of those first 2 churches were situations that we don't need to get into all the details.
Sure.
But it was shocking. And it was something that to think that the leaders of the church were acting in this way, and the things that were happening behind closed doors were something that just made me realize, wow, this isn't what I see in Scripture. Mm-hmm. I can't believe that this is all there is. That I'm just going to follow the status quo and do what I'm told. And it was everything from ideas on how to do ministry to how to reach lost souls to how much I should be paid. Mm-hmm. And so these were things that as a person who was a little bit advanced in age and had seen a lot of worldly experiences, and even ran my own business at one point in time as an electrical contractor, it just didn't seem like this was correct or this was the right way to do things, and that there had to be a little bit more than this. And so that's when my prayers started to change a little bit, to ask God to open my eyes and surround me with the kind of people that could help me better understand how I could become all that He wanted me to become, and how I could do a better job of building His kingdom in a way that didn't seem so narrow minded.
Yeah. And again, without going into a lot of detail, I'll just add a few things, Todd, to what you said, if I can, just from my perspective, because again, obviously it's your story, you walked it, but I had times along that journey that you let me speak into that. You would reach out with conversations or details of this or that. And here's the tension I want to tap into, because this is what will resonate with many, many listeners out there, is that here's it's not that Todd wanted to come in and just overhaul everything and do all these crazy, wild things. It's a pastor who actually is excited about reaching people for Jesus, leading a church that's making an impact in the world and in their community. And if that requires that we do things differently today than what we did 4 or 5 decades ago, I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to lead through those changes and suggest that, and stand up to the Gladyses that would want to hold us back, right? And so that's the situation that you found yourself in. And where many pastors then give up is they recognize, I can't beat this. The system is set against me. The cards are stacked against me from a leadership standpoint. Our church is structured with our bylaws in such a way that Todd, I know pastors who don't even get to vote on things in their church. Like, so, and again, I'm not going to go deep down into that rabbit hole, but it's like, so then you see the story of the pastor who just kind of gives up becomes, you used a really powerful word a minute ago, he's a puppet, just kind of passively going along, deep in his heart, knowing there's got to be more, there's a better way, but this is the church that pays my checks. Writes my checks. They're not very big checks, but it's my paycheck. And again, it's one of the things that we're trying to help pastors overcome at Entre Pastors, to go, let's get you a paycheck from another source, and one that's not so small and so limited. And anyway, you were willing to push through that. So let's advance the story a little bit, and walk us through kind of where you are today, and then we'll start getting into more of the business side of it, the financial pieces of it, or the entrepreneurial pieces of it.
Yeah. One of the things that helped me get to where I am today was, I don't know if you want to call it an epiphany or what, but I was in one of your mastermind classes. And it was early on in my second church that I was at, the first one where I was the lead pastor. And it was an unhealthy situation. I'd only been there about a year. And we were in this mastermind class, and we were talking, and there were a couple of guys in there that were just discussing the fact that they were in a situation that had been the same for like 5 years. And they were being oppressed, I guess you could say, as the lead pastor. And it was kind of the consensus of a couple of these people that, as I started to voice some of my opinions or my concerns about the situation I was in, they kind of gave me the impression that, oh, you're so naive. You have to understand that this takes time, and that you're going to have to slowly deal with this. You can't just be a bull in a china shop and go in and start changing a bunch of things. And the one gentleman was in a situation where he was about 7 years in. And I thought to myself, there's no way I'm going to do this for 7 years. If it means that I have to get myself fired, I can't just be a puppet and just accept the fact that this is how it is. This is, if you're going to be a pastor, this is the rules. follow them. And it was at that point in time that I just felt like one of the blessings of meeting you, John, was you gave me permission. And that's a huge thing, and we'll probably get to that a little bit more later, but you gave me permission to say, it's okay. It's okay to not sit there and just be a puppet for the next 7 years. It's okay to go find new ways. Now try to be tactful about it.
Sure.
And you said to me, Todd, remember what Jesus told his disciples, you need to be as shrewd as a serpent, but as gentle as a dove.
Yep.
And it just really resonated with me. And it started a transition in my life where I felt like I had been given permission to do what God had called me to do.
Amen.
And it was a very powerful moment in time as I look back at it. It was a very scary moment in time also because you're making a calculated decision that here's where my personal line in the sand is.
Mm.
And these are my non-negotiables in life. And when you get to that point, it also creates a boldness. It creates a sense of fear and excitement, both, that allows you to boldly remember who's in charge here, ultimately, and that is the creator of the universe. And so that started this journey that I have been on for the last couple of years, where we launched Harvest 10-2.
Todd, I'm going to pause you. I'm going to pause you real quick because I got to connect the dots here on something, and then we'll get back to your Harvest 10-2 journey. So you had mentioned earlier, not being a bull in a china shop, and I agree with that. Like I agree, as a pastor, there's discernment and wisdom if you're coming into that scenario, not just coming in guns blazing and get on the bus or get run over type of mentality. However, to that thing you said about just this is going to take time. It's like time coupled with a bad attitude is where Gladys got to where she is. I mean, giving Gladys more time is not going to fix her attitude. Like, so you've got to lead as a pastor. And I want our pastors to hear that you led, Todd. You found a way to lead. You were as gentle as a dove as much as you could be, but as shrewd as a serpent. You found a way to outmaneuver and outflank some of this gridlock in the church where you've got some really stagnant things and people that are very okay with stagnant because it makes me comfortable, even though it's totally not accomplishing the mission of the church. So I just want to affirm that Gladys doesn't need more time. Gladys needs leadership, and she needs that line to be drawn in the sand to say, hey, and by the way, for those of you who's this Gladys he's speaking of? Gladys is my, hypothetical caricature. So it could be, Deacon Dale or whoever, you fill in the name, them, Pastor, you can already picture who these people are. But there has to come that point where what they need is leadership, and God called you to lead. And so you have, Todd, you have led. So tell us the direction you are leading in and what's going on now.
Yeah, and if any of you want to really know who Gladys is, get John's book, and then you'll understand a little bit better.
Thanks for the plug.
Yeah, you can buy me lunch later for that plug.
Yeah.
So now that fast forwards us to Harvest 10-2, and Harvest 10-2 basically just started as me taking that first step of feeling like God had said to me, Todd, there's a group of people out there that I need you to reach, and they're good people. They give you the shirt off their back kind of people, but for whatever reason, these people aren't going to get plugged into the traditional church model. Whether it's right or wrong, doesn't matter. For whatever reason, they were maybe scarred in the past. Maybe they had some kind of experience that has led to them saying that if it's the traditional church model, then I'm not going to even give it a shot. And these people don't necessarily have a problem with Jesus.
Yep.
They have a problem with the entity that we call church.
Yep.
And so I felt like God was telling me that these are the people I want you to reach. And we're going to do things a little bit different here. when we go about doing that. And it all started out, and it was kind of post COVID, by just taking the messages that I was preaching every Sunday in our traditional church setting and re-recording them. Sometimes I'd sit in the lawn chair, sometimes I'd sit in my basement on the couch, and I would just off the top of my head, kind of like if you were sitting down next to your uncle drinking some iced tea and he said, "Hey, what'd your pastor say at church today?" This is how I would have responded. And I did that, and I also started creating some things that I called, as a little quirky thing, the Merit Minute. Just little, couple minute long, kind of informational, maybe motivational, maybe little videos. And wow, the response was unbelievable. And in the response, God started opening some doors for for us that have evolved in one sense rather slowly, but in another sense, now that I look back, they were very organic and very Holy Spirit driven, not Gladys driven or elder board driven. And it felt exactly right. And as that has progressed through the process, I knew in my own heart from watching other people, from listening to the Entree Pastors podcast, from being involved with other people that were like-minded, which is so huge. You need to surround yourself with like-minded people, people who aren't so like-minded that they're yes men or
Right.
women, but you want them to be able to push back on you when you need to,
Hmm.
but people who also have similar visions, who have similar ideals about how maybe things can be done a little bit. The message doesn't change, but the way you go about doing it maybe changes a little bit. And so I've been very blessed with being able to kind of plug into people who I viewed kind of like mentors, who have been very entrepreneurial in how they do church. And I got to see different people whose buildings didn't sit empty 95% of the week. They were used to do many, many other things.
Mm.
And it got my brain going, it got my juices flowing, and it got me opening my mind to some new ideas and some new ways of thinking that have basically evolved into kind of where we are today. I don't know if you wanted to elaborate on any of that
I
before I go
do.
into that.
Let's get into that. But I'm going to back up just real quick to say, so you started Harvest 10-2 while you were still pastoring a very traditional church that in many ways was kind of stuck. You had two things going, but I think here's the question I want you to answer for our audience as succinctly as possible. If you and I met on an elevator and I'm looking at your t-shirt for our audio audience, if you're not on YouTube, I can see you've got a t-shirt that says Harvest 10-2, and I'm like, oh, what's Harvest 10-2? What's your quick answer? And I'm only going to the third floor, so you got to get it out quick.
I would say that it's an outreach ministry where we're trying to help people take their next steps in faith.
Okay.
And that would probably be the simplest answer.
That
And
only took us to the first floor, so I got two more floors. So like,
all right,
what does that look like?
our mission statement, our motto is that we want to create a community of collaborators, not consumers. And so, really, when I say the mission statement to most people, I say we're a community of collaborators, not consumers, whose goal is to help people take their next step in faith and draw closer to God. And usually, the collaborator part is what would lead people to, what do you mean by that?
What do you mean by that?
And so, I truly believe that the North American church, for whatever reason, there's a couple of things that we do uniquely, but one, when it comes to the church portion of it, for whatever reason, you can go to any major university in the country, into the big lecture halls, and you'll see a professor standing up front speaking, and here's a whole bunch of rows of students staring at the back of each other's heads, taking notes in hopes to someday pass a test. For some reason, the North American church thought, oh, that'd be a great way to do church. Let's get somebody to stand up front and spew out a bunch of information, and we'll have a bunch of people take notes in hopes that someday when they come face to face with God at the end of their earthly existence, they can pass a test. And I don't believe that that's what we are created to do. I believe that we are created to be a little bit more collaborative, to not be just consumers, but to be collaborative. And that collaboration isn't just in our ministry setting, it's also in our day-to-day lives. It's being able to, if I'm going to have my oil changed, I'm going to have it changed by somebody who's like-minded, who maybe is a part of my church, or at least I know that they have similar desires and interests in their life, that they have a similar walk with God that I do. And I'm going to give my hard-earned money to that person as opposed to maybe somebody else. And in turn, hopefully, we can, as consumers, help support and collaborate together with like-minded believers in the workplace, downtown, in our hobbies, and all the things that we do. And so collaboration also goes into kind of another branch of Harvest 10-2, and that is Harvest and Home, which is our entrepreneurial side of our ministry.
So let's get into that. Tell us about that. And by the way, so are you a church? Like, do you consider yourself to be the pastor of a church? Do you meet for worship services? Like, what does that actually look like? If I'm like, how do I get involved in Harvest 10-2?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, I am. I consider myself first and foremost a pastor. And that is something that will always be part of who I am. We have worship services. We have harvest huddles, which are our small groups. We have different gatherings and outreach events. We are scheduling a mission trip for next year. So in that sense, yeah, we do a lot of the exact same things that a lot of other churches do. I think that some of the differences that you're going to find is in some of the other things that we do. Whether it's when we gather and worship, we don't sit in pews in a row like in a lecture hall. We sit around a table. We always our worship center is set up almost like an event center or a banquet hall. And we sit around tables because what do you do at a table other than eat? That is, you collaborate, you talk, you tell stories, you do life together. It's just less consumeristic, more collaborative. And so that's a little bit different. But then we have a building that we've been blessed with, and we can get into that a little bit more here in a second. But a portion of the building is we have about a 14,000 square foot building. About 4,000 square feet of that building is where we worship and where we, I guess, if you want to say, do church, that kind of thing. But we don't just do that once a week. That portion of the building is also used for, and it will be used for, things like birthday parties, class reunions, maybe baby showers, maybe retirement parties, maybe just a family reunion or a family Christmas party. One of the things that we realized in our community is that there's a post-COVID, there was a huge gap. It used to be there were all sorts of places that we had our daughter-in-law's baby shower a couple of months ago. We couldn't find anywhere to have it in our community. You got all these churches sitting empty, and for 95% of the time, and we couldn't find a place to rent because the one place in town is booked out for 3 years. A couple of the other places just were so expensive, we felt that it didn't feel like for a baby shower, that fit the bill.
Hmm.
And so one of the things that we realized is, hey, here's a need in our community that we can use. We're already worshiping together around tables with chairs. We're already set up in a way that's conducive to that. Why not rent the space out and use that to bring income into our Harvest 10-2 ministry in that space? So yes, that 4,000 square foot that we're in, we worship in, we do Bible studies in, we have gatherings in, but we're also doing commerce in that. But if you go on the other side of the wall to the other 10,000 square feet of space, that's where we're doing commerce. That's where Harvest and Home is.
So tell
And
us about that. What does that look like? What all would I find if I walked on the other side of the building and started to see all of this? And what's your vision for the rest to come?
yeah, so if you were to walk into Harvest and Home, you're going to walk in and you're going to see Amish built furniture. I mean, well built, oak, solid. It's going to take a couple guys bigger than me and you, John, to pick it up and carry it around kind of furniture. Really well built furniture that some of the stuff might cost you $5,000. But
Hmm.
on the flip side, you also have in the building, you have things like a flower shop that had been in town for years and kind of left. Well, now they have grab and go flowers in there. You have their candles in there. You have a clothing line of infant clothing that is organic clothing line for infants and sensory toys and things for infants. You have home decor. If you want to, you got a shower you're going to, an event you're going to, you want to quick pop in there and you want to grab a sign, you want to grab a knickknack, you want to grab some little item that you would put on somebody's shelf. You can do that. There's soaps, there's lotions, there's essential oils. We have a chiropractor who grew up in the community and who has a chiropractic firm, him and his wife. They both graduated with my children, and they are about 3.5 hours away where they live. Well, they still have a lot of connections. And so they are going to be leasing some of the space to have a second location where they will schedule appointments a couple days a month in this second location as well. And you can find things. We have a old school, old fashioned candy section where you can get root beer barrels and those bubble gum cigars that you
Oh yeah.
chewed on as a kid, and all those kinds of things that might only cost 25 cents. But there's going to be a wide variety of things that are in the Harvest and Home section of the building.
I love that. And it's probably safe to assume, Todd, and you can give more detail to this, but as your ministry is opening itself up to the community in commerce, in the entrepreneurial side of ministry, you probably are getting opportunities to have God conversations with people, because it turns out that the marketplace actually is and can be ministry if we take Jesus with us to the marketplace. It all belongs to him. Is that a fair summary? I mean, tell us about that.
You know, it is exactly a fair summary. The fact that we are able to have in that one building all these different ways that we can reach the community, whether it's through commerce, whether it's spiritually speaking, whether it's just helping fill a need for a party they want to throw or whatever. All these things lead to spiritual conversations because you're going to very much see in the commerce side, you're going to see sprinkles of faith-based stuff. You're
Sure.
going to be able to purchase the devotional that I wrote. You're going to be able to purchase that. You're going to be able to purchase Bibles. You're going to be able to purchase some of those things. And there are going to be some of the signs that are hanging on the wall or the things that are used to help add decor to the building that are for sale are going to very much lean towards, oh, this is a faith-based location. So yeah, that will lead to spiritual conversations, of course. But just the fact that you look on the other side of this wall, we have barn doors that I built, huge 10-foot tall by 6-foot wide, 4 of these barn doors that slide on a slider. And it's going to be open if it's not being rented out, if the worship area is not being rented out while commerce is going on, those doors are going to be open and people are going to poke their head in there and be like, what's this over here? It almost looks like a church. There's a cross on the wall. And then that will create an opportunity to explain to them, hey, well, why aren't there pews or why aren't there chairs lined up? Why are there tables? And so we can talk a little bit about our collaborative approach to every single thing that we do within this 14,000 square foot of building space.
Yeah. Well, Todd, can you imagine where you were just a few years ago, like when you and I first met? Like if I was able back then to paint the picture and say, Todd, just hang in there, man, because a few years from now, you're going to be leading this new ministry where we've really stepped away from so much of the drama and the unhealthy, toxic parts of pastoring, that you're not going to have to deal with that anymore, because we're going to set it up differently. It's going to be funded differently, and it's going to actually be having an impact. Like, could you have imagined that then? Because to look back over our shoulders from where you are now to then, like, you've come a long way. And as I said at the beginning, like, I'm super proud of you, but could you have imagined that? And can you imagine going back to pastoring the way it was?
This is something that I did a Merit Minute last week. I was pooped. I mean, I've been putting in quite a few hours, and we've been working hard on getting this going. We're, right at the beginning of things here, and I've been pretty tired out physically, mentally, spiritually. We know that you have to come from a place of rest if you want to be powerful and successful. And I was kind of pooped out, and I did a Merit Minute last week where I told people that I had reminded myself that oftentimes the things that tire us out right now, the things that are burdens today, are answered prayers from a year ago.
Well,
and the tiredness that I was feeling was a different kind. It was a very positive kind of tired because of all the answered prayers, and because we were now in a spot that was so much healthier. And so, no, I can't imagine going back. But you made a comment. I want to elaborate, if I can, on how some of these things are funded. I believe you said something about it being funded differently. And, one of the things that is helping to fund Harvest 10-2 is the entrepreneurial side of things. One of the agreements, we've been very cautious in who we allow to have product in Harvest and Home. And one of the things that has been part of this that will help us out, both Todd and Courtney as a couple, and also Harvest 10-2, that will help both personal and professional entities financially, is that the people who are within the building, they're not renting space necessarily as I get this many square feet for this many dollars. What's happening is, as a collaborative effort, we want to help everybody be successful and help everybody take their next steps in this world. And so we're getting donations from those people based on their profits. And so we've made an agreement. For instance, if the organic clothing line makes $1,000 in profits during the month, then they're going to donate to Harvest 10-2 10% of their earnings back to the church. And so that's helping to support Harvest 10-2 in a way that you're not only counting on tithes and offerings, you have other entrepreneurial ways that you're funding the ministry. Now, as for Todd and Courtney, how's that work? How are we benefiting financially? Yes, I'm collecting a paycheck from Harvest 10-2 as the lead pastor of our ministry. Mm-hmm. It's not the kind of paycheck that maybe some other people make in other professions, but we have other opportunities too to help supplement our income. And here's how we're doing that with Harvest and Home. We made an agreement with the owner of the building, who is the one who has the Amish furniture for sale. And the agreement was this: Harvest 10-2 is paying rent on the 4,000 square feet that they're using. But how can we make this work for everybody where we can all benefit? And the agreement we came up with was, here's what we're going to do. We're going to sell your Amish built furniture for you in Harvest and Home. And in exchange for that, we get to use the other 10,000 square feet of the building for free.
Wow.
We're paying utilities only. So I guess it's not free. We're paying utilities.
Sure.
Now, that in its own right is worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
When you start talking, because we are on the main four corners of Otsego, Michigan. And so there's a lot of traffic that comes through there, because the highway that runs in front of our building goes from all the way from Lake Michigan all the way to the east side of the state of Michigan. So on top of that, though, not only are we not paying rent, my wife, Courtney, who used to own a boutique, used to own a gift shop, is now able to sell her product within the building. And so if she were to go rent a building and sell her product, imagine renting a 10,000 square foot space. Right. There would be a lot of overhead. There'd be a lot of cost involved in that.
Right.
She's not having to pay that cost. She will make a donation also. If she makes, however much she makes, she'll make her donation to the church. But she's also going to be able to make her profits, as well as she's managing I told you that Harvest 10-2 was also going to lease its space out for events, for things like baby showers and parties and things like that. Well, she's got a flat fee that she's getting paid as the event coordinator to schedule those events, to kind of oversee that as well. And so on a personal side of things, we are able to not only do the ministry that we want to do, but we're able to use the hobbies, the gifts, the talents that my wife has, for instance, that God has blessed her with, and use it in that same location to hopefully give us a little bit of flexibility financially in our later years, to be able to start doing some things that we wouldn't have been able to do on just a pastor's salary, I guess you could say.
Todd, there's so much about your story that I love, and I hope that other pastors are listening to this going, I don't have to do exactly what Todd's doing, but the principle is that if we open ourselves up to think entrepreneurially about this stuff, there are solutions. That's what entrepreneurs do, by the way, Todd. They see opportunity where other people see problems. And are there problems in the church in North America and probably around the world? Of course there are, because it's made up of people. There's some deep ruts. We're stuck in some ways. Entrepreneurs will look at those problems and go, okay, I see an opportunity here. And I'm firmly convinced that the Church of Jesus Christ could benefit greatly from some entrepreneurial leadership from its pastors. And the cool thing about that is, if we could get our pastors living as entrepreneurs, they won't be suffering financially like we have for a really long time in this gig. And so that's what we're committed to. And I love everything about your story, man. I love the growth I've seen in you, the progress, the leadership that you've demonstrated, and love seeing a pastor thriving, man. I know you're tired, so I'm writing a prescription right now and airdropping that to you for some rest. Get away, stop, cease doing what you're doing, rest. Because even though the fatigue is coming from exciting God stuff, it's still fatigue, right? So we need to deal with that. But man, praise God that fatigue is coming from all of the opportunity and the fun that you're having in ministry these days, as opposed to the beatdown that you were experiencing a few years ago, and where sadly many pastors still find themselves. So Here's my last question. I got two more last questions. Second to the last question is, what advice or encouragement if you knew right now there's some other pastors leaning in, listening, and they're thinking about it, they're on the fence, they've got all their yeah buts of why it's not gonna, your story won't work for them. What would you say to encourage those pastors, just to light a fire, encourage them, comfort them? What would you say?
I think the biggest thing that they need to hear is that you have permission. You have permission to do what God has called you to do. If you feel like God is nudging you to do something that's maybe a little different, maybe something that your church has never tried before, or that you've never tried, or pastors in your area have never tried. If you feel like God is nudging you to do that, I want you to know you have permission. You do not have to just stick to the norm. You do not have to follow tradition. You do not have to be a puppet, and you do not have to be a victim. God has put those nudges in your head and in your heart for a reason, and you need to listen to those. You have permission to give it a shot. And if it is God that's speaking to you, he will bless those things.
Amen, man. Well said, Todd. You said it better than I could have written it myself. So my last question for you is, how could people connect with you, Todd, if they wanted to reach out and see more of what you're doing? Where do they find you online? What's the best way to connect?
Yeah, probably the easiest way is just go to our website, harvest102.com. And there's a connect card on there. You can email me through there. You can reach out to me there via phone, text, email, whatever you want. And I tell you what, I have been so encouraged over the last few years because I had somebody like John and others who gave me permission and helped me to dream, and also told me when I was being crazy. And I would love to be able to pay that forward. Because here's the thing, we need to fail forward together. We need to encourage one another and walk alongside each other with the ultimate goal of, this isn't about building Harvest 10-2. It isn't about building Todd's kingdom. It's about building God's kingdom. And I'd love to be able to help anybody that I could do that.
I love that, Todd. Well, we'll share that link in the show notes of this episode. And I highly encourage anyone, man, if you want to connect with Todd, he's legit. He's a real guy. He will follow through on what he said there. He'll get on a call with you and encourage you as well. So Todd, man, this has been fun. Thank you for coming on the show, and thank you for your friendship. And I'm still cheering for you as you continue to lead forward in all of this, my friend.
All right. Thank you so much, John. I greatly appreciate you. And everyone who's listening to this, I just want you to know God has great plans for your life.
Well, hey, thanks for watching this episode of the Entre Pastors Podcast. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can be notified every time we release a new episode. If you'd like to get connected to other pastors who are learning to think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs, then we invite you to check us out on Facebook. Just search for the Entre Pastors Connect group, answer a few of our simple questions there, and we'd love to include you in the conversations. And if you're really ready to go to the next level, then we invite you to join our Entre Pastors membership community. When you become a monthly subscriber, you will receive access to courses, exclusive community, and coaching that will help you along in your own Entre Pastors journey. If there's anything else we can do to serve you, please visit us at entrepastors.com, and we will do our best to serve you there. God bless everybody. See you soon.